welcome back to our slideshow. Today we are talking about disease containment of COVID-19. My name is Louis.
My name is Deeja.
And my name is Daniel.
Number 1, introduction.
COVID-19 was found in Wuhan, China in December 2019. It is very infectious and has spread rapidly over the world. The respiratory symptoms that COVID-19 most frequently produce might resemble those of a cold, the flu, or pneumonia. More than just your lungs and respiratory system might be affected by COVID-19. The condition may also affect other areas of your body. COVID-19 is also a respiratory disease, and like most other respiratory viruses, it spreads swiftly by droplets that are emitted from mouth or nose when breathing, coughing, sneezing, or speaking.
The U.S. With a huge GDP of almost $21 trillion, the United States is one of the top nations in the world in terms of GDP. They are an advanced contemporary democracy. It can be classified as either urban or rural depending on the state, but generally speaking, it falls under the category of both. By September 2022, there will be almost 335 million people living in the United States with a life expectancy of 79 years old. COVID entered the United States by a businessman from Wuhan, China in the middle of July 2019.
In this presentation, we'll be talking about issues all over America with COVID. We'll be talking and discussing about many topics, all revolving around a central topic, disease containment. We'll be discussing how the US reacted during these terrible times from 3 different standpoints. The standpoints in which we will be viewing these problems from will be political, which will be done by Louis Victor, economic, which will be done by Deeja, and social, which will be done by me, Daniel. In this presentation, we'll give you an insight into America during the COVID period. There are many things that the US did in retaliation to the virus. Let's get straight into some of them. The group thesis. This is our group thesis. The use of principles from both science and individuals in society, one is able to comprehend and appreciate the implications of how disease containment had a significant role in limiting the spread of COVID-19, as well as how political and economics and social factors influenced how the country resolved the issue.
Number 2, how is the science used to solve the disease? So, how does COVID affect the body? COVID is a virus, and the virus enters healthy cells in your body and spreads them. There, the invader multiplies and makes duplicates of itself all over your body. The coronavirus latches onto receptors on healthy cells, particularly those in your lungs, with the help of spiky proteins. The viral proteins specifically enter cells via the ACE2 receptors. Once inside, the coronavirus seizes control and commandeers healthy cells. Eventually, some of the healthy cells are killed. The Omicron version, however, doesn't appear to harm lung issues as severely as the other variants. According to some studies, COVID-19 spreads through droplets from an infected person's cough, sneeze, or breath. They might come in contact with you in the air or on a surface before your eyes, nose, or mouth. This allows the virus to enter your throat's mucous membranes. Within 2 weeks, you will start experiencing symptoms such as coughing, fever, shortness of breath, fatigue, headache, sore throat, and lack of taste and smell.
COVID is a virus that spreads by air transmissions or by physical contact and ingestion of the virus. COVID has been spreading from country to country. They started in China, in Wuhan, and now they are everywhere in the world. The way that it enters the country is by air travel and boats. COVID affects everyone differently, and they do different things to the body. The regular symptoms of COVID would be fatigue, symptoms that get worse after physical or mental effort, fever, in your respiratory system, including difficulty of breathing or shortness of breath, and cough. The more neurologic symptoms or mental health conditions, including difficulty of concentrating, headaches, sleep problems, and dizziness. When you stand, pins and needles, feeling lose of smell and taste.
Transmissions. COVID is transmitted through body fluids such as saliva, which can get on the facial area. Its symptoms are especially hard to distinguish since it's so close to the common flu. Most restrictions being given to citizens were stated by the states as they had autonomy on the issue. While some states had tighter restrictions, others were more relaxed. All the countries closed the COVID restrictions around the world. All the countries around the world all closed down their borders, and they made masks mandatory. Mandatory lockdowns were soon put in place, and vaccines were then made mandatory later on. The reasons why countries used lockdowns and quarantines was that they figured out if you were close to someone with COVID, you were likely to get COVID. More specifically, COVID is spread through body fluids of an affected person. If someone has COVID and sneezes or coughs on you, you have a high chance of getting the virus. So by that logic, they figured out that keeping people who have COVID away from people who are healthy would increase the spread of COVID. Now, by using that, they thought of the idea of quarantine. According to Oxford Languages, a quarantine is a state, period, or place of isolation in which people or animals that have arrived from somewhere else or being exposed to an infectious or contagious disease are placed. To simplify what Oxford Languages says, a quarantine is a fancy word for saying that they separate an individual from a larger group. They do this to determine if they are infected, and if they are, they keep them away from people to stop them from getting sick by being close to them. Quarantines were only the first step. As the case numbers still grew, we decided to keep everyone indoors. By keeping everyone indoors, they were able to slow the spread very effectively by keeping people from interacting with each other entirely. This ensured that people with the virus, even if they were unaware, couldn't spread the virus.
Number 3, the impacts.
COVID caused places like the socialist perspective of how we look at this. The social perspective looks at how the citizens of different communities reacted to the COVID-19 outbreak. The pros and cons from a social standpoint. The pros of COVID-19 were that people got to experience a new lifestyle and were able to express their passions more, as they had less places to go to and more time to think to themselves. But the cons of this much outweighed the pros, as the mental health of the people during the COVID time took a drastic hit. There was a rise in suicidal thoughts and a rise in alcohol and substance use. Many adults reported a high rise in depression and anxiety as well, almost 50%. Furthermore, people who were sick were afraid to go to the hospital for treatment because they were in fear of contracting COVID, which meant that people who had serious conditions never visit hospitals, making their condition worse. Doctor's appointments were cancelled due to the hospital caring more for COVID patients than other patients, leading to a mass discomfort for those who relied on medication. With the whole world experiencing the same issue all at once, it allows people from all over the world to resonate and empathize with each other and share possible ways to cope with the new lifestyle.
Economic. The economic viewpoint specializes in the statistical analysis of the COVID period. Due to COVID, many businesses had to close down due to the restrictions in place and a reduced number of people buying their services and goods. One of the positive impacts of the economy was the rise of online services and video streaming. E-commerce was expanding quickly, even before COVID-19 arrived. However, the epidemic pushed even more Americans online, where they made more frequent and larger purchases. Over the previous 2 years, the pandemic brought in an extra $218.53 billion in revenue for e-commerce. According to Digital Commerce 360, their forecast that the coronavirus will contribute to $102.08 billion to the U.S. e-commerce in 2020 and $116.45 billion in 2022. In 2022, consumers spent $870.78 billion online with American companies, a 14.2% rise from $762.6 billion the previous year. If the pandemic hadn't happened, according to Digital Commerce 360, e-commerce revenue wouldn't have reached $870.78 billion until 2023, 2 more years. Additionally, internet sales will only reach $754.33 billion by 2021. This means the boost was good for smaller businesses online, but the cons outweighed the pros. Numerous companies, both large and small, closed their doors, which resulted in millions of individuals losing their employment and being unable to provide for their families. The global economy suffered a severe blow, losing 3.4% of its total GDP, or about $2 trillion by the middle of 2020. Due to the limits put in place and the closing of borders, the global unemployment rate rose to the high of 6.18%, and the amount of global trade fell by 11.6%. Additionally, the second quarter of 2022 saw the biggest decline in US GDP in 70 years, a decline of 8.9%.
The purpose of the political viewpoint is to look more in depth into the actions of the legislative figures during the COVID period. In light of the surge of COVID cases, many countries closed borders, leading to the stoppage of global trade. Because of this, importing and exporting harder started to dampen countries' relationships and cause tensions between countries. It wasn't just the countries though, as tensions grew between the people and the government in the US. People started protesting against newest restrictions set by the government, causing an uproar in anti-vaxxers and protests so-called freedom. As the tension between people grew due to COVID arriving from China, people started hating on Asian Americans, which led to political uproar. Even though there might be negatives, the US government was able to improve on disease containment laws as this incident has taught them a lot. They were able to reflect and change their laws on pandemic issues due to this.
Number 4, conclusion.
Socially, the effects of COVID had a great impact on the mental health of people. Yet there were positives such as providing opportunities for people to pursue new goals since they were always stuck at home, during building new relationships online and continuing their lives with a new perspective.
Politically, the US suffered greatly from protests and loss of faith in the political leaders. Though the US were able to change legislatives and improve pandemic laws, they suffered from how the population reacted to these changes, leading to political instability.
Economically speaking, the damage COVID has done to the economy in the US outweighs the pros. Though COVID has helped e-commerce and boosted small online companies by giving them an opportunity during lockdown, overall the economy has suffered greatly and is still recovering due to it.
Through the use of, in conclusion, COVID had a great impact on the U.S. economically, politically, and socially. Through the use of INS and science, we were able to analyze the situation and the solutions to come up with the conclusion that the cons of the solutions the U.S. implemented outweighed any pros that came out of it.
This is my works cited.
And this is my 2 slides of works cited.
And this is my work cited.